Welcome to the New Masculine Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Stock, and this is a space for men who are ready to move beyond outdated models of masculinity and into something more honest, connected, and whole. Here on the New Masculine, we often explore how the ways we're socialized as boys can lead us to become disconnected men, disconnected from our emotions, from ourselves, from our friends and family, from our communities, and even from the earth we live on. My next guest sees it much the same way. Roberto Schiraldi is a licensed professional counselor, licensed clinical alcohol and other drug counselor, trauma therapist, and racial justice advocate and trainer with over 40 years of experience. In his new book, Post-Traumatic Macho Disorder, The Way Home, Roberto unpacks his theory that the cultural conditioning of macho masculinity not only dehumanizes men, but also undermines our collective well-being. But he doesn't stop at naming the problem. He offers a new path forward. And as you all know, I love when someone can not only identify what's broken, but also helps us find our way through it. I'm looking forward to exploring Roberto's theory, understanding how he defines macho, and perhaps more importantly, getting to know him as a man. Roberto, welcome to the New Masculine.
Thank you, Travis. It's delightful to be here with you.
Oh, this is like my favorite thing to do, is to connect with other men who share these perspectives and helping us figure it out. So it's totally my pleasure to have you. Yeah. I know one thing that felt important to you is you wanted to start with a little drumming. Would you like to kick us off?
Yes, thank you very much. Just a little intro. From parts of many summers, I was very blessed to be invited out with a group of other folks to the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. The Rosebud is the home of the Sichango Lakota people. And our teacher had been an apprentice of Joe Eagle Elk, who was one of the most revered healers, medicine people, as whites call it. And as I was going into one of my first sweat lodges, I don't know if people know what a sweat lodge is, but it's it's a dwelling, a little off the ground with branches stuck into the ground and tarps or blankets over the dwelling. And then below there's a hole, and there's a fire outside the sweat lodge, and they bring rocks into the hole. The flap is closed, it's pitch black, and then the leader pours water over the hot rocks that just came out of the fire, and this incredible intense heat comes up, which is amazing because the darkness, the heat, and then the prayers and the songs and the laughter and the crying and all of it is this amazing healing experience. So as I was about ready to enter into one of my first, my teachers said, Roberto, before you go in, I was about ready to kneel down and kiss the earth and before I crawled in. They said, you're such a good man, but you're really hard on yourself. They said, you need to learn how to be compassionate with yourself. And I went, whoa. How did they know this? And I'd already been a trauma therapist for many, many years, teaching, trying to support and, teach and model for the men that I work with how to be more compassionate with themselves. And here I was still doing the same old. So I went into the sweat lodge. Yeah. And it really, and I'm still working on that. That was probably 40 years ago, however many years ago it was. And I'll probably be working on that one till my last breath.
It's those lifetime patterns that we're all working on. I say with my clients, I think there's usually most of us have about 4 or 5 patterns we work on for our whole lives at different iterations and levels. And it's just the continued learning.
Yeah. Patience, compassion is the right word. And it's a great gift. And I'll continue to try to unwrap that gift. So then after that experience, I made a commitment, which is a lifelong commitment, to be a pipe carrier in the Sichango Lakota traditions. And by the way, please know that I'm very sensitive to not co-opting or, native wisdom and teachings. We were blessed, we were invited, and we were taught, because Joe Eagle wants us to know this stuff because he felt like it was one of the best chances that we could support the healing of the incredible pain on the reservations, with the poverty and all the stuff that's been done to the indigenous people since Jump Street in this country. So he wanted us to learn these ways so that we can share them to help with the healing. So I made this commitment to be what's called a pipe carrier, and I don't have it with me, but it's in my next room. I forgot to bring it here. But the pipe is used to do ceremonies, healing ceremonies with. And the idea is that the smoke from the pipes carry the prayers, the wishes up to the universe. And so this is the song they gave me when I made my commitment to be a pipe carrier for the rest of my life, to use pipe and healing ceremonies. Ognashmaya kanaya kilo he wakaya he wa ilo he Ognashmaya kanaya kilo he. And it keeps repeating it 4 times. Oh, the drum was given to me by an elder, Black Wolf, who made this drum. He's an Inuit elder, and my dear brother John painted white buffalo calf, tree of life, eagle, and a black-tailed deer with the moon, or the sun. The reason why it's so important was because the Matakayasan is Lakota for all my relations, all my relatives. We are all one. We are all connected, and that all life is sacred. Sacred meaning worthwhile, important, valuable, precious as a most beautiful precious stone, worthy of love and dignity and respect and wonder and awe, and that all life is sacred. And I'm no better, no worse than that insect, that tree, that animal, that child, that woman, that other man, that all life is sacred. Imagine how different everything would be, and we wouldn't even be not needing to have these discussions about macho and men and all the problems if that's what we were all taught. But unfortunately, we're not. We're taught just the opposite. Even in a lot of the religions that are trying to do the right thing, the message gets lost, and we, as the beginning of this country was all about, everything was expendable, the indigenous people, the animals, the land, and we're still doing that. We're still hurting our. And to me, and please know, I'm not trying with anything I say, I'm not trying to guilt trip or blame anybody else, because anything that I have problems with, there's a lot of things I have problems with, especially in this crazy moment in time, but that's nothing new. It's been going since the beginning of the earth. But so I'm no better, no worse. Everything that I have problems with lives inside of me. Mm-hmm. I know that for sure. Mm-hmm. So the things that cause me the most problems, the things that get me most enraged or sad, it's this deep pain. It lives inside of me, and I can be that same person that I'm sitting in judgment in. So I have to work really hard on that. Mm-hmm. I sing the song because it helps ground me and remind me of what's really important, because I can forget it in the midst of being frustrated or scared or whatever. So.
I know, me too. I appreciate you starting us off from that foundation. I think that's really helpful, as I was sort of alluding to in introducing you, was this place of disconnection that many of us live in as men, and to start from a foundation of connection, to recognize our interconnectedness, that there is no hierarchy of value, that we all have worth. I know that we'll get to hear some of your own journey as a boy growing into a man, but I think starting from that foundation so that we can really understand that that's where we're heading, and that's the reminder that's available to us all, is that I just really appreciate you starting us from that place. So I'd love to hear some of the stories that come to mind when you think about growing up from a boy into manhood. What were some of the things you learned, the lessons you gathered, the things that were done in your life that created the man that you are?
So I grew up in fear. That's how I grew up. I knew that I had parents who loved me, and a family. There's a lot of Italian families. They have large families, and there's a lot of love. And I was scared shitless. Excuse my French. I was scared of my own shadow. My father was a very angry man, and there was violence, and there was alcohol, and there was always, even though there wasn't violence every day, there was always that looming threat of violence. And I used to have nightmares. And I grew up so afraid and not trusting who I was. I didn't even, well, first of all, I didn't know who I was. I didn't have a clue. Not that that's much different than a lot of us, and the looming threat of the violence, and feeling like I was never good enough. There were some times that I wished I could have protected my mother more. And I didn't because I was scared. And I'll just fast forward a little. That led me to being afraid to be anywhere. But certainly, being in school, I felt scared. I didn't want to be there. I didn't relate to it. Didn't make sense to me. I learned how to be a people pleaser. So knew I needed to be a quote man or emulate the male things that I was seeing. And I'm not saying that all the men in my family was a real mix. There was real macho guys, and there was real humble guys and quiet guys and gentle guys. But the message that got through to me basically was, I had to learn how to. It was more the macho. Let's just say it that way. But I didn't feel it inside. I felt scared, and I felt more. I could relate to a lot of the traditional feminine qualities of gentleness and kindness and wanting to share and give and be gentle and kind. But I always felt like I had to prove myself, so I ended up playing sports, whole different sports, especially leading into high school: football, basketball, baseball, track, and then carried that on when I got into the service. I was drafted during the Vietnam thing, and I had to the combination of the sports and then when I got drafted going into the military. By that time, I had already done a flip from trying to prove my manhood. I was thinking about being a Marine or a Green Beret or whatever to prove my manhood.
What other more extreme ways can a guy do that to
Yeah,
the Marines or the
exactly.
Green Beret? Yeah.
But when I got drafted, by the time I got drafted, and to my father's credit and my mom's credit, and they were divorced at that. They got divorced when we were young. They were separated as far as I can remember for a long time, and they finally got divorced when I was 12. My brother was 11. My sister came along. Uh, they came back together at one point, got pregnant to try to keep the marriage together. She was born after they divorced, so she literally came out of the womb screaming, and I felt protective of her. Um, she was so angry, which I understand. How could she not be? She knew she was unwanted. So I felt like this protective older brother and protective of my brother too, although he told me years ago that he just wanted some attention from me. And I was just so busy trying to survive. So anyway, back to the war came, at that time I'd done a flip. I was in college. I had volunteered at a home for emotionally disturbed kids, and as a group counselor, and I could relate to those kids because I knew exactly how they felt growing up and in those kind of homes that they came from, mostly from Brooklyn and Queens, and that's where I grew up. And they touched me so much. I remember there was this young boy, Jimmy, and he just touched my heart. He was a little African American boy, came from incredible poverty and really rough background in the Bronx. All he wanted was he would be this. I could see myself. He was doing this fight thing and being so tough, and because he didn't trust anyone either, and he was scared too. And I just wanted to adopt him. I drove him to see my brother play football at one point, and he was like 10 years old, I guess, and he just fell asleep. He was laying across my lap, and I just went, oh my God, I just want to protect him and keep him safe because I felt so unsafe, and I could just so anyway, got into the service, drafted. By that time I was in the protest movement, went to Canada to try to avoid going in, but then your choices, then you either stay in Canada, never come back, go to jail, or go kill or be killed. So the choices weren't
Mm.
real great. So I chose to come back and join the medical corps so you could help. I could help people instead of killing people. But the macho thing was so blatant in the service, as it is in most male-dominated things. And back then, we didn't have any women going.
This word macho is an important part of our conversation today. It's a part of like what your sort of theory is. It's about what the book is that you've written that we want to talk about. So I'd love to hear you kind of pull out a little bit more on defining what that means. Like what stuck with you in childhood was this sort of macho perspective. You're talking about it in the military also. I think most of us can make assumptions of what that means, but I'd love for you to help us anchor into a shared definition of that.
Well, cutting to the heart of it, it's this protective suit of armor that we feel boxed into. And to me, fear is the essence of macho,
Mm.
which is the irony, because the macho picture is being strong and tough and never let them see you feel vulnerable or cry, showing any weakness, or that you might be gay or feminine like. Those are the ultimate fears. And so we have to put on this strong front, and and it's been something that's been going on since day one in this world. Um, the modeling, unfortunately, and I'm not, again, I'm making gross generalizations here because it's not that way for everybody, and I'm not saying all men are macho assholes. I'm just saying this mentality is that men have to be in charge, the leaders. It's very akin to like a definition of wealthy white heterosexual male supremacy
Mm-hmm.
cultural values, which is, competition to be number one at all costs, no matter who you need to walk over to get there. Power, wealth, control, success, image, tough. Don't be vulnerable. Number one, don't be vulnerable, which is the antidote for machoism, is having the courage to be gentle, kind, and compassionate, and cry,
Mm.
which is like, Mom, anything but that.
It's the thing
And
we're taught from very early on not to do, and that we haze each other around as little boys. Is none of that's allowed. Something is what I'm pulling out of this, that the way you describe it, I appreciate, is sort of the protective suit. That it's about protection, and it is a suit that we wear to protect the part of us that's afraid. And so much of, I think, people who maybe prescribe to or lean into that sort of macho identity might have some. They may push back and be like, "I'm not afraid." But it's all part of the same suit. Is to appear afraid, to acknowledge that there is fear as a human being, that there can be weakness. I mean, that's the complete thing that's trying to avoid. And so something that I appreciate about, I think, what you and I both believe is we're both willing to look at the thing. We're both willing to call out the problem and say, like, this doesn't work for any of us. It's dehumanizing. It's not working for any of us. And yet we both have compassion that that suit of protection is there because someone is afraid. We see a scared boy who feels the need to perform in that way. And so it's not about shaming men for this piece that
Mhm.
we've all
No,
inherited, that we've all been
no.
trained in. It's about compassion for this scared little boy, and maybe helping that little boy find other ways to deal with his fear or to move through the world that's less scary.
Beautifully said, Travis. I think again, you're right on the essence of it. I've been a trauma therapist with primarily men for most of my career, and drug and alcohol stuff, you name. But the hardest thing, I'll just cut to right to the heart.
Mm.
The hardest thing for every man I deal with, every one of them, including myself, which goes back to the compassionate thing in the beginning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is being gentle and kind with ourselves, with
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Every man
Mm-hmm.
I deal with, it doesn't matter who they are, what their background is, racially, sexual orientation. I keep using the word fear because we don't. Why are we so concerned about somebody seeing us cry?
Mm-hmm.
Because then we'll be seen as being vulnerable, or then we can be taken advantage of. We're not strong, whatever, all those things. So men, the guys I work with who I love so much, they have so much trouble with the concept of being gentle
Mm.
and tender. Tender. I use the word tender. They go, "Oh God, don't." And they're such beautiful men, each one of them.
Yeah.
But that thing it's just this huge struggle to cry. Yesterday I cried for a long time in the middle of a whole group because I was in a thing that the person asked me, what's this thing called love? And I just started crying because I missed my partner who died 2 years ago, and who taught me how to love, and who accepted me fully for who I am with all my. I was a liar and a cheat and a coward for most of my life, or at least half the life, until I made a commitment to not kill myself and move on. But to know that somebody would choose to love me and accept me completely for who I am, with all the stuff that she knew about me, and because honesty was going to be the bottom line to this, or else it wasn't going to work. And I was so afraid to be honest because I was a liar and a cheat and a coward for most of my life because I didn't feel like I could be honest because I didn't think I could survive if I was.
Mm.
So,
Wow. Let's dig into this a little bit because I really resonate with what you're saying about it doesn't really matter the man, the type of man, the identities he holds. Gentleness is a very difficult thing. I feel that in myself. Like we're
mm,
all trained in this sort of like intensity culture that we never really learned as boys how to be
mm,
gentle,
yeah.
and especially with ourselves. And some men, I see a lot of men do really well at developing that for their children once they have them, but they still never hold it for themselves.
Ugh,
And it's so heartbreaking to see that,
it,
that
it,
like,
it breaks my heart. Oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
God.
yeah. Well, I want to hear about your journey of learning that gentleness. You sort of alluded to there was some parts of yourself that lived pre a certain moment. There was some, it sounds like some suicidal ideations that you struggled with, and then a moment
It
of
was,
change. So can you tell us about the journey?
yeah, it was a lot more than just, not just that. I'm not minimizing
Okay,
that, but it was a lot more than suicidal ideation.
got
Ideation.
it.
Uh, a lot of it's exacerbated when I was in the service. I was working in an intensive care psychiatric unit in an army hospital with what was left of a lot of the guys who came back from Vietnam, crazed to the max, and a lot of
Just
whom
taking on all
me.
that passive trauma next to you.
And I was doing a lot of drugs myself, even though I'm working in that
uh,
because I hated my existence, being part of the
uh,
war machine, so to speak. And we would sneak off the post at night. Me and my buddy Denny, we were working for an underground paper where we would get the letters from the guys over in Vietnam telling about all the atrocities we were committing over there, as there are in every war. Uh, but you're not allowed to talk about that if you're a part of the military. So
yeah.
it's more the insanity. So we would sneak off the post to print a paper about the letters that we were getting from the guys. And we started doing a lot of drugs and blah, blah, blah. But when I got out, I felt so much guilt and shame being part of it all. And I continued to do the cheating. I cheated on my first girlfriend in high school and all the way through when I got married twice. And um, I was married and had a stepdaughter. I cheated on them and was hurtful. And I was still doing a lot of drugs, lying. And I felt so much shame and guilt at a certain point. This was in the end of my second marriage. And I decided the only way I could deal with the shame and the guilt was I would kill myself so that my wife and stepdaughter would get the life insurance payout, which they wouldn't have gotten if I'd killed myself. So I had to find somebody who would kill me. So I looked up in a Yellow Pages to find a private detective. I figured they're slime buckets. They'll do anything for $1. So I said, I called this guy and I said, you don't know me. I don't, but if you will meet me today tonight at the street, I'll give you all the money I got in the bank, which I think was at $2,000 at the time. If you would kill me, so my wife and kid, and there was a silence on the other end. And I was ready. I was really excited about the possibility. Excited, as I guess weird term, but there's a long silence. And he said, no, I'm not going to kill you. And he said, you need to go get some help. And I went, oh shit, if this guy who I thought was a slime bucket is telling me I need help, I must really be messed up.
Jeez,
But I'm a
that's
thick-headed
that's
guy,
eye
and so
opening.
it was another 6 months till I finally got into treatment, serious
Uh,
treatment. And they said, don't waste our time. If you're going to kill yourself, do it on your own time. We got too many people who are hurting. If you're willing to make a commitment to not kill yourself, to stop all your addiction stuff, and to learn, this is the hardest one, to start learning how to love yourself. I went, oh, no, 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 please. I can do the other thing, but don't ask me to do that, And that's where it all started, and I've been trying to do it ever since. Sometimes I do it well, forgiving and loving being gentle and kind and loving and appreciating myself and respect. And sometimes I suck at it, and I need to go back to the almost the basics. For the most part, I'm doing a lot better at it.
I appreciate you taking us into the darkness, because it's real, and it's I think a lot of men are experiencing that and facing that. And part of this, I think, is a big piece around how much we lack gentleness, how much we lack connection, how isolated we are, how disconnected we are, and how afraid we are, and never really being taught skills for how to navigate that other than to defend against it. So I appreciate you taking us into that space and sort of sharing with us how dark it was, but then also how eye-opening it was, and how much bravery and courage it took to like do that piece where you said no, which is to learn to love yourself. I always like to highlight that people think that that's weakness or that's feminine in some way. I'm like, I can't think of anything more masculine than that courage and bravery it takes to do the thing you're scared of or the thing you say no to. So thank you for highlighting that. You can make a commitment. You can live a whole lifetime in one way, and you can decide that that no longer works for you, and you can make a change, and a significant one. And also that it's not going to be perfect, that you're going to struggle with it sometimes, that you're going to fail at it sometimes. And even as a like a counselor and a therapist, and like that, I always like to make sure, because there's a perfectionist inside of me, there's a young wounded part of me that's trying to defend against the world through perfection, and I'm just not. None of us, that's the human condition, to not be perfect. So I appreciate so many of the layers that you brought us through just in that story. It sounds like your love with Eileen is an important part of your next part of your
Mm.
story. So please take us there.
Oh boy. Hmm. So, if there was a long break after my last marriage and deciding to stay alive and learning how to love myself and committing myself to sharing that with all my clients. Uh, and I share pretty freely with a lot of my clients, even though our training is just be objective and keep this objective distance. So you don't project their stuff on it. But to me, that was a lot of baloney because, if I'm going to be asking people to go on this ride, which I think does take a lot of courage, even though, again, it's hard to see it that way. But when I say, you're doing the bravest thing you can do, and they start going, huh, it's a tough sell. But I tell them my story, and it's one of the reasons why I wrote the last two books, The Macho and then The Awakening with Love, because I was sleepwalking through most of my life, and I didn't have a clue about love because I didn't feel worthy of love. So how am I gonna, if I can't love me, how am I gonna love anyone else? So, I was on this road. And I knew I was doing better, and then this person, I meet this person, and right away, we both knew, but we also knew we weren't ready to do anything. She
Mm,
had her own divorces and stuff, and I had my own, and for 35 years we knew each other, and we became really good friends, and we only see each other once or twice a year, or maybe talk on the phone or something. And then 35 years later, she calls me up one day and says, "Roberto, what are you doing?" She says, "I just broke off with my partner and the other person I was with for 7 years. Took a year to get myself together and learn the lesson." She says, "So, what do you think?" I said, "What do I think? I think I've been waiting for 35 years. That's what I think." And
you two are playing the
so
long game with each other. My goodness.
we got together. We talked about what would this look like if we were thinking about doing a commitment kind of thing. And I knew from the training, from my therapy and everything else, it had to be based on, because I was such a liar and a cheat and felt so shitty about myself, had to be based on 100% integrity,
Mm,
100%, no white lies, none of that stuff. Because I believe that's what sabotages. How can you have trust if you don't have 100% honesty? So she had nobody ever said that to her, something like that before. And, she was a wonderful person, but, as most of us, we do the white lie thing. And she said, "No more white lies, huh?" So we got together though, and that's what it was based on. And we made that connection. And then I just want to tell you this last story about Eileen. She, oh my God, she, she lived outside of Philly, and she ran the community gardens program in Philadelphia with the Black and Brown communities in Philly, and teach. She would take old and abandoned lots and work with the community folks to create them beautiful gardens that were safe places for the elders and the children to hang out, and they would do organic gardening and grow foods for their cultural celebrations and stuff. And she was so well respected, this little skinny Irish girl from, but she was so trusted because she did what she said she was going to do. It. That was the irony when I said about 100% honesty. I said, I mean, that's who you are anyway. But, with family stuff, there's a lot of unhonesties that go on. So anyway, one day we agreed that this is what we were going to do. We were going to start working on it. But so one day we're walking along the tow. She would come up and visit me. We're walking along a towpath, which is a path along the canal, hand in hand. And and this struck me what was going on, and I just collapsed and started crying. And I hadn't cried since my first divorce. And uh, she said, Roberto, she kneels down and she's holding me. She says, Roberto, what's wrong? Why are you crying? I said, if you leave and go home back to Philly and something happens to you, I realized I wouldn't want to go on. I wouldn't know what to do.
Mm,
And I realized how much that I love you, and that I'm possible of loving someone now. And so that's what struck me. And then she started getting cancer, got the first one, then knocked her brain cells out, all the treatment, and then she got another cancer and pneumonia and COVID, and we both got sick, and then she passed. But it was grueling, it was excruciating, but it was such a gift, Travis, and all the people listening. I wouldn't change. The only thing I would change is, of course, the suffering that she went through, but
yeah.
the precious she I said to Eileen, how can you say you love me when I've been such a scumbag for so. She said, but I know what you did then. You've told me it all. That's not who you are now. And I love the man who you are now and that you're committed to. And I respect it so much. And I respected her so much. It was so. When she died again, I had to make again another decision. Do I really want to go on? And I didn't want to go on. I really wanted to
Mm-hmm.
go with her. She said, Roberto, it's not your time yet. You got some more stuff that needs to be doing. And one of the things, I guess, is being here with you today. And hopefully, if we could touch any of our other of our brothers to support us, all of us, in being connected to our hearts and our
Mm,
tender, beautiful hearts that we all have, and then it's all worth it. And she's looking down at us, smiling, and saying, "Yeah." So
mm. Thank you to Eileen for the encouragement to help you keep going so that we could be here having this conversation. I feel really
yeah.
grateful that she reminded you to keep going. There's something very intimate and beautiful about the trust that she put in you. I think
Mm,
so often many of us are hurt in relationships and we fear that people don't really change, that who they were, the mistakes they made, the challenges they've brought, they will always continue to bring that. And so we can't trust other people. I know that's sometimes what I've experienced in my life. And just that story of the trust she put in you and the
mm,
faith in who you were now versus who you used to be that you earned by sharing with her all those things, by making the commitment to no white lies, to making the commitment to like doing it differently this time. But the trust she put in you is really beautiful and quite sweet. And I imagine quite healing for you in terms of that part of you that didn't feel lovable, didn't feel like you deserved love. Like it's really powerful to hear that. Thank you for inviting us into that relationship.
mm. You're most welcome, and thank you for creating this safe cocoon for us to share this in. Because one of the things that I had to demonstrate, though, because I continued to screw up, I wasn't an easy person. When I finally moved her up here, I said, "You can't take care of yourself." She couldn't remember things anymore. So I said, I didn't even hesitate, and that also let me know how much I loved her. That because I didn't really want anyone to live in my space. It was my private space, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd lived alone now for a long time, and but I didn't even hesitate. I said, you gotta move in." And she didn't hesitate either, even though she had trouble leaving her sweet little home that she lived in. It used to be a grandmother's, but she knew she couldn't take care of herself either anymore. So, but I wasn't the best partner sometimes, and I'd do stupid things like complain if she would put things away because she was so good at doing stuff, and I couldn't find them, and I was so used to being able to find things, and I'd get angry, I'd get annoyed or something. How stupid is that? She can't remember, and I'm getting annoyed at her for not remembering. Jesus. So I had to do a lot of times when I would have to not a lot, but at least sometimes I would make amends. But then one of my poems is, sorry isn't worth anything unless I demonstrate that I'm going to change my behavior. And so we would sit down and we would talk, and that was the cool thing. She was never out to get me, and I was never out to get her. I knew she had my back, and all she wanted was to, if there was something, conflict or something, let's just make this right. Let's stop the drama and let's just make it right. So
It's
So
a
blessed.
it's
Such a
a
gift, Travis. Oh my
lovely
God.
invitation. Like I find because so many of us are so defended in this world and so hurt and not having processed it, I find that many of us are in our primary relationships out to get each other. Not because we're choosing that, but because we haven't processed all of our stuff. So we're kind of taking it out on each other. And
Yeah.
little things like things being moved around that aren't in their normal place can trigger that part of us that feels out of control in this crazy world.
Mm.
So I hear you, and that's a a beautiful reminder that that's where relationships thrive is when you're not out to get each other, when you're on the same page, looking for the solution, looking for the way through. Yeah, that's what I always try to remind myself in my marriage. Because as you were talking about things being put away, I laugh at myself. I'm a Taurus. I'm a creature of habit. I like things done a certain way, and so I can get really rigid around things being moved around. And my husband has to deal with that sometimes because he's not that the same way as I am. So I laugh thinking about that. That because I see myself in that for sure. Can we
Hmm.
talk a little bit about now the book that you've written? Because it ties some of the pieces that we've been talking about into sort of what you're offering in this portion of your life. So I had you define macho, and your book is called Post Traumatic Macho Disorder. Um, and so I'm really curious why you chose that framing of using the language of like PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, and using it to play this theory out. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. My brother wrote a book called The Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Source Book, and it, it's widely used in a lot of we had it in our counseling center at Temple University when I worked there.
Mm,
And one morning I woke up and I just started kind of laughing at the play of words, and I said, "Let's see, post-traumatic stress disorder. Certainly, we live in a high-stressed life."
mm-hmm.
All around us, a culture of stress and fear and
Mm-hmm.
war and but I said, "Now, what's underneath all this?" And it just the macho. That's what's been causing this drama since Jump Street, since the beginning of the planet. And so I said, really, the disorder needs to be called post-traumatic macho disorder because we certainly live in a disordered world and we label people with disorders when
Mm-hmm.
really there was a book by this woman Ann Wilson Schaaf back in the 70s. I think it was back when we were doing the addictions work. Anyway, she said we live in an addictive society, but really, then the addicts are the ones that get scapegoated when it's an addictive society. We live in
Mm-hmm.
an addictive world, an addictive society with disorders. And so anyway, the 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 macho, um, to me, it's where does it come from? And the reason I use fear, first of all, I just wanted it to be I wanted to find antidotes so that we men could be brave enough to start learning to cry more and be vulnerable. Because if we don't
Mm.
cry, then we're walking around constipated, afraid of letting loose. So many of us live with so much grief and
Mm.
rage, which is on top of all the deep sadness and pain. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so much rage. And if we can allow ourselves to be, again, brave enough to go into that, because we're so afraid. What are we so afraid of? We're afraid what? We're going to go crazy if we're going to lose our control. Well, first of all, I don't really know how much we control have we have any control of anything really,
Yeah,
other
all that
than
control's just an illusion, anyways.
it's a big, to learn how to care for myself. That's about all the things I can manage. Everything else, I
Uh-huh.
really can't control anything. So the main reason I wrote it was to, and I remember the express explanation for macho. It started, and I had a vet. It was okay to use that word because, and I went to some of my dear racial justice allies who are Latinos, and said, "Is it okay to use this term?" And there was a mixed reaction because it comes from Spain. The uh, machista was the original word, come from the nobility. So right off the bat, it's a one-up kind of thing.
Mm.
And it was about, there was a lot of some beautiful things like protectors of the family and being respectful and doing the right thing to stand up for, but that was part of it. But then the other part of it was, you got to do what I say. I'm the
Yeah.
man of the house. And if you don't do it, then you could get beat up or whatever. it's kind of like you're part of what you're allowed for. I'm not saying all men did that. I'm just saying there was the flip side of it was the side that was so hurtful to, I believe, to our own humanity as men. That we felt like we had to do this tough guy dance. Otherwise, someone is going to take advantage of us because it's a dog eat dog world. Understandably so, because it is a harsh world out there a lot of times.
Yeah.
I had a woman at a drug and alcohol treatment center that we were talking about this thing, and I was talking about the importance of teaching our children, our young boys, how to be gentle and kind with themselves. She said, "Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and everything, but I'm a single mom with 2 boys, and I'm not going to teach them to be gentle and kind because the world's going to eat them alive." And I say, "Wait, please understand. I totally respect what you're saying, and I'm not saying to have them be gentle and kind in lieu of knowing when you need to stand up and say, no, that's not okay, standing up to bullies, being honest, brave. No, it's not either or, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that we can be gentle and kind, we don't have to be macho our whole life all the time. We know when we can be gentle and kind because that's where our heart lives and our beauty lives and any chance it's love and intimacy.
That's so important. I appreciate you sharing that story because so much of what I'm always encouraging, I think a lot of people relate to this conversation from basically a subtractive perspective. Like if we're pointing out looking at this, then I have to stop being this and I have to start being this over here. And people think it's like I have to delete parts of myself. And I'm not sure that's the truth. I think this is an additive process. It's allowing the whole expression of a human being rather than just one part of it. So that strength, that ability to stand up for what matters, to be able to stand up and say no and set boundaries and call things out is great. And also that ability to be with self in quiet moments in gentle ways is also really important. And so I'm glad you shared that because I think a lot of even really well-intentioned people teach or advise or parent in ways that only help develop one aspect of things, even though, and they're just trying to do what's right and what's best and trying to keep their kids safe. And yet there is this whole other piece that will actually bring real safety, that will bring real ability to move through the world with a solid foundation underneath you.
Yeah, yeah. Another dear friend of mine in spirit, we were talking about, she has this little grandchild named River. What a beautiful name for for a little boy. And we were talking about how to model for parents, or we were talking about maybe having a children's book about being unconditionally loving and accepting of their parents. And when you hear the term unconditional love and acceptance, what? But it's not, it doesn't mean, again, that there's not going to be boundaries and consequences and limits to behavior, because parents need to look out for the kids and make sure they're safe and teach them the right lessons. But the one thing that every infant needs that very few of us get consistently is to know that they have a parent, ideally 2, but at least 1. When the parent looks at them, they can feel this unconditional love and acceptance. I love you totally, and you don't have to do anything to earn it. It's just because you're alive. It doesn't matter what grades you get or anything else. Now, I'm not saying I don't want you to get grades and there's going to be consequences, but I love you for who you are, this beautiful human being that you are. And unfortunately, I think, most parents are just so stressed out. They got so many things they're dealing with in this more stressed out kind of world. There's all this technology. The kid wants a little attention. They stick a thing in front of their face, a smartphone or something. And any child or every human being just wants to have this caretaker looking at them with unconditional love in their eyes. I just love you so much. And I thought, well, what is there any kind of analogy that we could put about what this means? So if we could help, train parents about that. And the closest thing I could think of was a dog, how a puppy or something looks at the owner with just this incredible love. So excited to see you every time, no matter what, and you don't have to do anything to earn it or anything. But that's it's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And I find that many people are struggling with being able to offer that amount of presence because so many people that are parenting right now were never offered that presence to themselves, that gentleness, that unconditional love. And so many of us are trying to create things that we never experienced for ourselves. And that's really difficult work. And if you as a man didn't have a dad that could look at you in that way as a small baby, as a child, then how are you supposed to know how to do that for yourself, let alone
Yes.
do that for the kids that you bring into the world?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's a difficult thing. I think it's worthwhile work. I think it's worth putting the effort into this. I think it is the solution that we're looking for as we move into this world, to be able to connect in that way. But I have a lot of compassion for how hard this journey is for a lot of guys, because many of us didn't have that modeled to us ever.
That's why we have a world full of leaders. I put in the openings, one of the preludes in the book, Post-Traumatic, was all the atrocities, that all the havoc that's reaped on this world is perpetrated by little boys in big man uniforms. People who are trying to prove their
So
manhood,
true.
how tough they are, how strong they are, and then they create wars to even prove more how tough I am. You're gonna insult me and disrespect USA. Bam, we're gonna war. We're gonna bomb the shit out of it. I mean, it's insanity. It is total insanity, and it's certainly not respectful for children to see two people putting each other down like two bullies in a schoolyard during the debates. How disrespectful! And that's the example we're given for our children. And to me, that's macho. And macho is no respecter of gender. It can be a gay person, a trans person, a woman. Anyone can be macho. And that's somebody who's being, to me, disrespectful of themselves and disrespectful of others, and about power, wealth, control, being number one, being the boss, being in charge, like that.
Yeah. Something that was very clear to me as I was reading your book was how much you bring in some of your work in racial justice, in your work in recovery work, in your own poetry that you write. You draw from several different cultures. You bring in the words of cultural icons, pop icons, that kind of thing throughout it. But something in there is your own poetry that you write within it. I'd love to invite you to share one of your poems with us that you write about men that kind of talks to this. We kind of pulled one out that we thought might be good. So I'd love to invite you to read it for us.
Thanks, Travis. So this is one of the earlier ones. It's called We Men, This Man. Since the beginning of time, we men have tried to be in charge, while many have died. We thought it our duty, our right, our job, to run the show, and even to rob others of their rights, a negative effect, preventing so many of freedom and respect. If we're in control, have the power and the toys, we think we're men, but really only boys. For the values often taught can fool us into thinking that the answers lie outside us, like money and like drinking. Then finally one day we awaken from the haze and we realize we've been duped, not been our finest days. And hopefully what we get is the wisdom from above, that what we've always needed is a heart that's filled with love.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. Where did that poem come from for you?
Well, as with everything, first of all, I had to own it's all inside of me. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't want to be sitting in judgment of anything, of
Yeah.
anybody, because it's hard. We're just following what we've been modeled for us, and what's been modeled ahead for centuries and centuries and centuries. That's what men do. That's what men do. But I do know that inside we're all the same. We have hearts. We have beautiful hearts that just want tenderness and safety and caring and love. That's what we all need. I mean, that's all the great wise ones have said since the beginning of time. The greatest power in the universe is love. Why are we going to short step trying to find shortcuts around that? Because it's scary. Love is scary because you can get really hurt.
Yeah.
You can get really hurt. Yeah, it hurt the hell out of me losing my partner. But I wouldn't trade anything because it was the greatest gift in the world. I'm such a blessed person. Holy crap. So I guess that's really the essence, I want to show empathy for all my brothers out there because we're all struggling. I don't know a whole lot, but I know one thing for sure. Love is the answer. It's the only thing that makes any sense. Everything else is total whack insanity. So
beautifully said. If you were going to take that sort of concept of what you're sharing and actually help a man understand what's something they could try, what's an action step they could take to start moving in that direction, what's your what's your advice for what's like the first place to start for most men?
Oof, the first place. Um, I don't know if there's a one first place for every man. It
Yeah,
might depend on the
fair
individual and
enough.
what's going on with them. For me, though, in the very beginning, when I was co-leading this men's center in Philly many years back, was on the heels of the feminist movement, and a lot of the women who we really respected who ran the women's centers would send men to us saying, "Hey, you got to do something with these guys because their partners are going to shoot them if they don't, if they don't get their shit together." And so we started running men's groups and support like you're doing, Travis, which is why I so love and respect you and so grateful to you that you're doing this. Now I can die in peace. It's in your hands and your heart. But the men would come, and one of the activities we'd have them do in the small groups was we'd give them some newsprint and the crayons. We'd sit them in small groups, and it was like they were little boys, children. So we said, come together, draw a picture of what are the messages you got about boys. And they would do a stick figure and then have the accoutrements all around, and what were the classic things? I just asked my brother John, who did my drum thing. So what were the messages you got about little boys when you were growing up? Oh, sticks and stones, and sticks and stones will break my bones, blah blah blah. And football and sports stuff and stuff like that. And definitely don't cry. What were the messages you got, and what do you think that did to you and how you perceive yourself as a man? It's like we go back home to the child. What was your little? Do you remember what it was like as a little boy? What did he need? What did you need as a little boy that you didn't get? And what can you give him you now? And that's to me the start of it. Because if we don't do that, then we're going fast forward to now, but there's so much healing from the past that has to be done. And if we don't do it, it's not going away. We could try to kid ourselves into, oh, I took care of that, in our heads, but
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
breaking.
Yeah, I mean that it's big and brave work that you're suggesting to do that sort of inquiry, to look back to the little boy and really get clear on what he needed and start working towards that. And I always suggest, like, there's lots of ways for men to do that. You can do it alone by reading a book like your book. You can do it alone by listening to podcasts like this, but you can also get help with that. You can also reach out to a coach, a therapist, somebody that's doing drug and alcohol stuff.
You,
Like, yeah,
Travis.
people like me who run retreats that are doing this, where guys are getting together to do that kind of work. Because I think, as you said, that intimacy that comes from crying and holding each other, there's an intimacy when men can show up and witness each other. And it doesn't have to necessarily, if the image of crying together holding each other is too much at first, come to my retreats where you stand next to a horse, and if there's tears there, you get to see a horse hold you.
Huh.
If Or just being witnessed by a group, and you didn't even have to make the physical contact yet. Like, there can be lots of different steps to this, and I always suggest people, like, find a step that works for you to do it. Don't just write it off as like, oh, whatever, I'm not doing that. Just actually take a step in the direction and see what happens. That's what helps us find our way through that darkness.
I have this guy. I just asked him to one little thing. Just do one little kind thing for yourself this week. And I go, whoa, that's like
It's
just that
amazing how
little
many of my
thing.
clients struggle with that. that everybody reacts that way. I'm like, really? We're that just one little thing? Like, wow, how is that so hard? Well, Roberto, it's been such a lovely time connecting with you. I
Yes.
loved getting to read your book, getting to read some of your poetry, and I just have really appreciated hearing your own journey as a man. I think that it's so a value of mine to not only just hear from you and your professional perspective, but to hear about the journey that got you here. So thank you for being willing to share that vulnerably, for introducing us to Eileen. Thank you for inviting us to post-traumatic macho disorder. I like that languaging because it's kind of confrontational. It kind of gets us to go, huh? Like, what? But there's so much compassion you bring into it that is really about helping us understand that we can't do better until we actually choose to do better. So thank you, Roberto, for being here, for sharing your work with us, and for sharing your story. If people wanted to buy the book or find out more about you in the world, how do they find you out there on the internet?
Oh, thanks. Well, you can do it a number of ways. You can go on my website, robertoschiraldi.com, and there's a section that shows all the books, and you just click on it, and it'll bring you right to a site how you can purchase it from Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever. Also on the website is some other podcasts I did with some of my racial justice folks, some of
Oh,
my most
excellent.
respected racial justice allies. And I use that as a screening tool. Like I say, if you're thinking about you want to do work with me, go check out some of those podcasts. And if that didn't scare you away, and if you think that there's somebody that maybe we could resonate in a little ways, then maybe we could, see if we could work together. So
That makes me laugh. That's exactly what I do this podcast for. If you want to find out if we're going to work together as a coach and a client, listen to this. And if anything offends you or you get scared of it, maybe not the right fit, but if you're interested in it, come on in.
I just got to say,
And
Travis, the world is such a better place to have you in it. I just love that you're doing what you're doing with the beautiful horses, the power and the beauty and the gentleness of that. And again, I feel a lot more hopeful that the world's in your heart, is touching your heart right now. And I'm really happy for you and Travis. And so
hey,
thank
thank you
you.
for that. I really appreciate it. Like the space for me to do this is because you did the work first, because you were one of those guys doing that right after the feminist movement, helping actually men step into this. So thank you for being a leader in this so that I can be doing it now. I appreciate that.
Mm.
If you want to get in contact with me, you go to my website at travisstock.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Travers03. That's where we keep these conversations live. If you have questions or reactions to this episode, please find me there and we'll keep talking. And if you want to be a supporter of this podcast, please go to patreon.com/thenewmasculine to become a contributor. Thank you again so much, Roberto, for joining us in The New Masculine. And until our next episode.